we need to see what is happening in the market, what the consumer wants, what the consumer needs, and we could see right now that there is a change in terms of how we are feeding dogs and cats. We've been going from and I can just refer to the traditional using kibble, and wet products, to now we have seen other formats. We're talking about, freeze dry, air dry, slow cook, gently cook, and then you have fresh and raw. So all these is to satisfy a need for the consumer.
Hello and welcome to the Pet Food Science Podcast brought to you by Wisenetics. I'm Jan Sugodolski and I'm dedicated to bringing you the latest insights and discussions in the pet food science industry. So get ready to expand your knowledge and stay ahead with today's episodes. And today I'm very honored to our guest today is Dr. Juan Gomez-Basauri. He's a founder and president of Magellan, a company which is dedicated to the development of science-based technologies and innovations. Welcome, Juan.
Thanks, Jan. It's a pleasure and an honor to be a guest at this podcast. I've been following your work for several years, and I'm really glad and happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
That's great. So we're going to talk a lot of gut health today. So, Juan, I know that you have a very long experience in the area of gut health, food science and so on. Maybe you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're coming from, what was your background, education, your whole career path, and how did you end up now with your own company?
Yeah. Well, so it depends how many minutes or hours we have, but I'll try to
We have
summarize
plenty
it.
of time.
I'm originally from Lima, Peru. Was born and raised there. Did my primary, secondary, and my university degree. Actually, I have an engineering degree, but then I got into the uh, food nutrition things had always been my interest. I went to England, sponsored by the British Council, did a master's in food science. Came back to Peru, worked for a little bit, but the bug of further education and further knowledge was with me. So I pursue a PhD in food science, biochemistry, nutrition at Cornell. And shortly after I finished, did a postdoc at Cornell. Went to work for Ralston Purina. They sent me back to Peru. I worked there on the R&D department, doing different things, but more on the livestock side, monogastrics, dairy, swine, poultry. Poultry is big in South America. And at the time, the founder of Alltech was visiting with me. So we established a good connection. And at some point, I was just coming back, and he said, "Well, are you coming back? Why don't you come and work with me?" And and the rest was kind of history, because I stayed with Alltech for almost 25 years, but different positions, several different things, all commercial, technical, new ventures, and after 25, 27 years. It was just time for me to see other pastures and talk to the family. We all agreed, and and then I decided to open my own business. So that's one of the things. I've always had curiosity to do several things, and even when I was at college doing my PhD, nutrition had a big drove and emphasis for me, because I was looking into the link between nutrition and health, and the impact that nutrition had in certain, immunity and things. Like, how can we do that? And that's kind of what I've been pursuing all this year. And this is what I'm doing at my own business right now. I work with several customers, advising in terms of how to develop new technologies that have an impact on health, and at the same time, companies that want to work in the pet food industry but don't know how to position things, then that's also part of my help. Because it is interesting, and you've probably been following the industry for several years as well. But uh, there is this kind of belief that, oh, we do this in the food industry, and then we can do that in the same thing in the pet food, and then we can make all these different claims. But the reality is different. I believe and I think, the regulations on pet food are even stricter than will be for human side.
Can you give us a few examples, maybe, or one or two examples that you in your career encountered?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's different things you talked about. For instance, different algae sources, and you can actually go and buy algae and use it in the human side. But some of the things, have to go to a scrutiny, and you have to prove number one, safety and efficacy. Then you have, the different things related to. I mean, I've been on the yeast and fermentation side for several years, and there's several compounds that can be obtained from yeast from the fermentation process, but then you can use those in the human side on supplements, and nowadays perhaps you can use them on pet food supplements as well. But if you want to get into kind of the mainstream, it's a little bit different. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I did, what I was doing, and kind of where I'm going now, Jen. So it's an exciting times, I think, because there's so many different things happening, and the way that technology is evolving is going at a very, very high pace. And sometimes, we're trying to to catch up with that, because if we don't, then we're gonna left behind.
We're gonna afterwards. You mentioned that your major interest now is longevity, so we're gonna talk about this. But before, I want to actually still pick your brain a little bit about changes. All your experiences over 25 years. So, what are the big changes that you see that happened like over the last 25 years? You mentioned technology, right? What do you exactly mean with technology? How does it gonna change the pet foods industry?
Some of the things that are happening right now, and probably is one of the buzzwords, is in terms of AI, artificial intelligence. And, a number of people are concerned either for good or for bad. People are talking, this is going to be replacing my job and what I'm going to be doing. On the other hand, is you're going to be using this technology as a way to improve and maximize your work and your efficiency. In a sense, I call this, and I was talking to a friend yesterday, a couple of days ago, and what I see, Jan, this is a revolution. In the past we had the industrial revolution, and that changed a lot of things. Migration from farmers to the cities looking for jobs. The line workers and all that, and the green revolution. So everything, every advance in technology creates changes, but then allows for society to make a bigger leap. And I think this is kind of what we're doing right now. This is what's happening at this time.
So how do you see AI, improving, or how do you see AI changing the pet food industry?
Well, one of the things is it will allow us to do things in a much faster way. So things that could take us probably maybe a year or so to develop, we can actually input some parameters into a model, and the model will tell us, what the result is. It will give us at least a glimpse of what it is. So what I'm saying is, it's not going to be, okay, we put in this and then we get the answer, but it all depends on what we're going to be putting in, what questions or what parameters we're going to put it into the system, so to get a good answer.
So is it about the ingredients to some degree, or how they interact? So
yeah, ingredients, the combination of different ingredients, how they work together. But and this actually will allow us to tailor diets as well. And that's another area that I'm looking into, which I see a lot of opportunities on what we call the personalization of nutrition. Um, so I think right now we're about to cross a chasm, and but we have the tools now that can allow us to do this. I mean, still, I don't think this is going to be happening tomorrow, but we are there, and there is a lot of interest, particularly as dogs, cats, and humans will start living longer. So we're looking for ways on how we can uh, maximize that state.
No, absolutely. But just I want to maybe come back to this term personalized. It's kind of a buzzword, right? But
Yeah,
what
yeah.
what do you practically see personalized? On which level could you see something that happened maybe in 2 years or maybe in 10 years? What do you mean with personalized? Because probably everybody has a little bit of a different, level of what personalized means. So how do you
Right,
see the
right,
future?
right, right. And this is sort of resonating with the consumer. So what happens is, we need to see what is happening in the market, what the consumer wants, what the consumer needs, and we could see right now that there is a change in terms of how we are feeding dogs and cats. We've been going from and I can just refer to the traditional using kibble, and wet products, to now we have seen other formats. We're talking about, freeze dry, air dry, slow cook, gently cook, and then you have fresh and raw. So all these is to satisfy a need for the consumer, what they want, because now the term which I think is overuse, the humanization of the pet industry. We're looking at dogs and cats as part of a family. But I look at it more as a way on how these companion animals can help us live better, longer life. Because if we do something better for them that we can find that is useful, it'll apply to us. Now, going back to your question, how do I see personalization? I can call you and say, you give me the dog of your name, how old it is, what it does, and then I can put together a package of food, and then I put a label with the name of your dog, and some people will call that personalization. Another step than that is I can, we could provide all that plus a regime of how we need to feed the dog or the cats in terms of calories. These are the amount of calories, it's all portion, it's all size, and this is what you need to give. So the industry has been playing with that for a number of years too, and particularly also on the veterinary side, some therapeutical diets as well, portion control and all that stuff. But now what I'm talking about personalization, Jan, is the fact that we can actually understand what you need, what your dog or your cat needs, and then we will provide the nutrients that dog actually needs for that. And the same thing happens for humans. Now, one of the things that we need to take into account is everybody is different. So there's some generalization, but there's some uniqueness as well. And this is what I'm going at when I talk about personalization. We need to feed to your uniqueness. And basically, as what Hippocrates said many years ago, food be your medicine or food be thy medicine. So that's kind of the approach that I'm taking. Well, thinking in this case, anyways.
No, absolutely. So where do you see the field going in when it comes to also maintaining health, right? So longevity is obviously a very important topic for owners, for our own vision. So where do you think, where we're going there? What strides did we make?
So one of the things, and you and I probably have discussed about before, and even when I was with my previous organization, in terms of the impact of the microbiome, what is the microbiome and how does the microbiome impact health? And then there's different microbiomes. The most important one, we could say, will be the gut microbiome. All the bacteria, the viruses, the fungus that live on that. All their genetic makeup, and how we can maximize that efficiency. I mean, you've done a lot of work on this, particularly with chronic enteropathy. You've created a dysbiosis system, but we can use all that information, because that's the beauty of this. And then this is where I tie the artificial intelligence. Use all the information that is available, and instead of scanning it for months or things, when I did my PhD, this is what I had to do, revise all the literature and spend countless nights. But you can do that in a short time. And then with that information, you can actually put together a plan for what you need. But I think the key thing on longevity is the intervention. Right now, people are talking about longevity, particularly the boomer generation, but we don't know that boomer generation, their starting point, how they were fed in their early years. Similarly, with dogs, is how are they feeding in those early years? When it's a puppy, when it's a kitten, if it's a dog that has been rescued. So we can provide different things, but the microbiome can give us a lot of information on that, and that's where I see this personalization going.
So when you talk about early life events and feeding, what are the areas we have to watch for?
We need to, well, and then even in early life, we can go back, because it's not the newborn, but it's also what the newborn had when it was at the mother's level. Now, if it was on during pregnancy and lactation and all those things. So is that. But then again, it is providing the right nutrition. What is the plane of nutrition that we need to provide? And and I can draw back to when I was working for Ralston Purina on the livestock side. And Ralston Purina was very good in providing the starter diets, what we call it. And when I work with farmers in South America, they will be using, a Purina starter feed because they knew that feed will deliver all the nutrients necessary for that animal, being a broiler chicken or being a piglet, to grow. And then they either continue with the Purina system or they will try to minimize costs and things. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that the nutrition at the starting phase is key for that. Now, throughout the life stages, there are particularly points of intervention. And I was just listening to in a meeting a couple of days ago that on the human side, there are particular points of intervention which are like when you are turning around 40, and then turning around 60 or 65. So kind of these are the key stages. So I need to look into that a little bit more detail and what is causing that. But similarly, if we apply that to cats and dogs, there's probably stages that we can intervene nutritionally. But nutritionally in order to prevent and maximize efficiency. Now, if we're talking about disease states, that's something else.
Absolutely. I know that a lot of companies are working, or companies or researchers working on this so-called biological clock, right? Like a biological clock. So do you have any insights in this area, and how can it help us?
Yeah, this is an interesting concept. And actually, I did a couple of presentations last year. Was it last year? Yes, I was doing several presentations, and one of the areas was about turning back the clock. That's I think how I position it. But that had to do with the mitochondria. And there is a lot of information out there, some probably good, maybe some other that has been puffed up, but definitely the mitochondria at it is the I call it is the engine of the cell. And on the longevity side, what we need to try to address is to prevent the degeneration or denaturation of those cells. But we need to go into what is the function of the mitochondria, because if the mitochondria begins to break down or it doesn't work, then that cell naturally is going to be dying. So turning the biological clock in my opinion, is providing the necessary maintenance to that engine. And how can we do that? Again, this ties back to the gut microbiome, and what those bacteria present in the microbiome produces. And this brings us to the metabolites, or nowadays called postbiotics, which is another buzzword that is used quite a bit. Because these metabolites, or certain metabolites, act as neurotransmitters, which then will provide chain of information to the mitochondria and ask the mitochondria to behave properly. So that's my take on this biological clock. I don't think we can turn it back, but we can probably slow it down.
I remember, maybe you familiar with it. I remember 10, 15 years ago, some companies, or at least one big company, worked on calorie restriction, kind of like a mimicking, right? Do you remember that? And is this something that is still on the table, or is it nobody's working in this area anymore?
Still doing that, and I know that that was done with dogs. I think they pursued it for pretty much all their life. And I think at the end, this was mostly with caloric restriction, and then at the end, it was determined that there was an extension of life of 2 years compared to the.
There was the Purina longevity study, but I'm referring to. There was a huge buzz a few years ago about some, I won't say chemicals, some compounds that kind of mimic, because, mimic kind of this calorie restriction, and then theoretically would slow down also a little bit aging.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if somebody's still working in this area.
Yeah. I don't recall that, but what I know, there is something happening right now. There's another term that people are talking about, is the biohackers, which you probably have heard. People are biohack your system, basically taking things that are going to be promoting life extension. One of those compounds right now is rapamycin, which has been used and has been proven to do some. I think it's used has been used when people have organ transplant to avoid rejection and maximize efficiency of the organ. But now I think there has been some other results that show that can also help and extend lifespan. Similarly, with I think there's another compound, metmorphin. I don't know if you're familiar with that, which is, I think it's used. Some of these things that are related to insulin control, sugar control. which again is if you're slowing down or reducing these kind of diseases, you can probably extend um, lifespan.
So, but probably to summarize, it's not going to be a simple approach, right? It's going to be a multimodal approach to that.
Yeah. So what happens is, again, as the societies evolve, you are always looking for that silver bullet or that compound, and then uh, on the human side, and then we probably extend this to our companion animals. We just go to the doctor and say, well, give me something that is going to take care of this. Or you take your dog and say, give me something for my dog that is going to do this. But that approach, I mean, could work for, certain time, but the overall thing is not being taken care of. And so the approach for nutrition, for health, needs to be more holistic. This reminds me, about this was 20 some years ago. The founder of the company I work with and I, we were on tour, and then we were giving different lectures. And one of the topics I was talking was about nutrition, longevity, and my approach was, there's three things that are important. Number one is what is your genetic makeup. Number two, what kind of diet you have, and number three is what kind of environment, lifestyle you have. So to me, back then, those three things were important. Fast forward 25, 30 years, and it's the same thing. People are talking about the same thing. But the difference is that back then, we didn't have AI, we didn't have the tools that we have now. So we're still looking into these three aspects. What is your genetic makeup? Can we change that? Maybe we will be able to in the future, but probably not now. But we can, through diet, we can do turn on or turn off a certain genes. Through your lifestyle, will be is what you do, the friends that you have, the happiness that you have, and your environment is it's basically what surrounds us. It's again it's the soil that we work, the soil that we walk, the streets that we walk, wherever we are. So we are surrounded by a whole environment, and there may be some compounds that are toxic to our system, and that also will have an impact on our microbiome. So we need to look at all these like
Absolutely.
a holistic approach.
It's time for our famous three.
Feed formulation software is stuck in the past. Most tools haven't evolved beyond basic least cost optimization. A Diet Forge changes that. It's an AI-powered platform with nonlinear ingredient modeling for enzymes and additives, cost per gain and maximum profit optimization, and real-time collaboration like Google Docs for nutrition. Every recommendation is grounded in world-class research, built for modern nutritionists who need more than legacy desktop software can deliver. Work seamlessly with your team and optimize the way modern operations demand. Try dietforge.ai free today. Feed formulation, finally modernized.
So we're almost at the end of our episode. So maybe just not really a tricky question, but diet, obviously, you mentioned diet is a major part of health and longevity. What's the best thing we can do now, recommend? Which part of a diet would you optimize to the best of your knowledge that we follow?
One of the things is, and this is one of the areas that I'm focusing, is I'm focusing on the macro ingredients, on protein, fiber, and to certain point the fats, because these are the major components of not only of our diet, but also the components of food for companion animals. So fiber definitely has an impact. Both protein and fiber have an impact on microbiome. So we're talking about postbiotics earlier. We're talking about short chain fatty acids, et cetera, et cetera. You can actually produce these short chain fatty acids from proteins, but also you can produce it from fiber. So definitely fiber is the best part, but it all depends again how you put all those things together. So in terms of a diet, we're talking about diverse diet, and that's another thing too that maybe moving into companion animals, introduce diverse ingredients because you want to foster diversity of the microbiome. But not only diversity, but diverse functionality. Because, as you well know, there's, trillions of bacteria, and we need to determine which are the bacteria that we need to facilitate to continue growing. Kind of a thought in here is I was just reading something about the what is it called? The black queen hypothesis for the microbiome. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but basically it kind of refers to this card game. It's called Hearts. But there are certain bacteria that loses certain genes to maximize efficiency, to maximize their living, but then some other bacteria that takes that upon themselves to continue working. So that's the functionality that needs to exist in the microbiome and how are we going to feed to do that? Because it's everybody's working in there. We don't see it, but everybody has a role. Somebody produces some metabolites, some bacteria produces some waste, which then can be used by another bacteria. And I mean, it's an exciting field. I mean, and you probably see this day in and day out, but it's amazing.
So ultimately, the substrate is one of the most important thing for bacteria and for ones. Great. So that brings me actually to my very final question. Is a little bit outside, but you mentioned what is your favorite book? So you mentioned this one book. Is there another one you recommend?
I read a lot of books, and actually, it's a friend of mine just. I'm not promoting this, but a friend of mine just gave me this. I don't know if you're able to see Outlive, yeah. But Peter Attia, talking about maximizing longevity and things. I think he was also. I'm reading this, and then another friend of mine gave me a book called How to Run, something about how to run until you're 100 years old. So. Okay.
So I think that's one other part that we didn't really discuss, exercise, right? It's an important
part.
That's
that activity. And then again, it's, we talking about dogs, right? And then the dogs spend, it will be interesting to see how much activity our dogs have, because, we go to work and then come back, and then the dog is spending most of the day just sitting on the couch. But that's another important aspect. So
thank you so much, Dr. Juan Gomez-Basauri.
Okay.
So that concludes another episode of the Pet Food Science Podcast, presented to you by Wisenetics. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to stay updated on future episodes. And until next time, this is Jan Sogodolski from the Pet Food Science Podcast signing off.